Nice. Well, yeah, I can also link to you on this if you want. I think I can
Uh,
actually do that. Edit it in the
okay.
post. So we are now live. So oh, hang on. Why have I clicked on the wrong one? No, I haven't. There we go. So I wanted to chat about, like, I've been interested in quite some time in, like, how does one disagree, or how does one get to understand why someone thinks something, or the way, not the why, because I think the why is actually quite ethereal and difficult for even us to nail down for ourselves, but the sort of how we structure beliefs. And so I'd come across this idea of street epistemology, which I'd seen much before. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. There's this guy
I've never
called
heard of that. No.
Anthony Magnabosco, and he is, I'm pretty sure, an atheist, and he likes chatting to people about religion. And I really like some of the tools he was using. So that was some of why I'd invited you. Put the invite out that you responded to.
Great. Yeah, sure.
The first place we were starting is trying to figure out how we know one another. I'm going to pull it. I won't put it up on the stream, but I was trying to figure out, because we lived. Where do you?
I used to live in London, and now I'm in Bournemouth.
Right. What's got you in Bournemouth, if you want to say?
Yeah, just family life and the sea, and um, before before COVID, it was a stronghold in my previous profession, which was my pre-COVID profession, which was teaching English as a foreign language.
Right. Okay.
So it's one of the centres for that. Oxford, London, Bournemouth, Brighton. They're the main places that students tend to go for that. But obviously, it's one of the biggest industries, like smacked down by COVID because of the travel restrictions. It's like private language schools that invite students from Europe, all other continents, really. Yeah.
Sure. And what kind of students would they be? Is that just somebody studying at university who's sort of Polish and wants to get better at English or something like that? Or is it?
Yeah, it could be that. It could be someone who wants to do the IELTS, who wants to do the like the Cambridge certificates. Someone who wants to. We did a lot of specialization actually with the Russian government, so we were working with Russian air traffic controllers.
Okay. Getting kind of close to the Kremlin there, right? With air
Yeah,
traffic
it
controls.
was. It
Yeah,
was.
right.
Yeah.
So
So
they
we
have
had,
to be, I guess, speaking super clear English, because English is a language of the skies. Is that right?
yeah, exactly. So then it always refers back to this horrible incident in Tenerife, I think in the 70s, where one mistaken preposition led to like a horrific crash. So
Wow.
they have very high standards for what is needed in of the language levels of controllers. And the Russians, they have this funny system where if they get you need a level 4 to be able to operate, and if you get a level 4, you get to they do a fully funded trip to the UK for 3 weeks every 3 years. If you get a level 5, they do it every 6 years. So they're all like, I need my 4, but I don't want a 5. It's kind of like
Become good, but not too good. So I
yeah.
can go, yeah, because I imagine they just like going, I would enjoy learning the English, but if Russia is anything like I imagine it to be, I would just want to be out of there sometimes as regularly
Yeah.
as possible.
Yeah, well, yeah, these guys they seem to have quite a good deal because they got a lot of free travel and they could use up their points and just travel to. I've got a few of them as friends on Instagram, and they're always like in exotic places and stuff. So there were some real perks in that trade, I think, for them.
Yeah, fantastic. And that was your pre-COVID thing. So what are you doing now, COVID?
Now I'm just I just got stuck into filmmaking, which is my long time sort of passion and
Yeah.
side hustle for many years as well. So
Yeah,
a lot of
excellent.
editing is like the main focus, but then I also shoot as well, and I also do some composition as well for film.
Fantastic. That's got to be
Yeah,
really rewarding to be able to finally get stuck into your side hustle.
yeah. It was like it was like I saw it as an opportunity when the first lockdown happened, and I just really this is something I've been thinking about um, is the sort of extrovert introvert sort of spectrum,
Right.
and
Yep.
how for people who've managed to sort of really, even extroverts, which is what I normally am, I think,
Yeah.
I've just gone right into my introvert mode and just sort of gone into my opposite mode and just been absorbing a lot of, because obviously setting up something new, you need to learn some things, learn your equipment, and it's been I've shifted my I guess I'm technically more on the introvert side now, but I don't know what will happen when it opens up again, but yeah, I've shifted a little bit my introversion levels.
Yeah, it's interesting that, isn't it? I've heard people say that it's sort of the rise of the introverts, which just sounds to me, is it interesting, interesting suggestion, because I've found the same thing for myself. I'm also just trying to make sure this stream's running. I've found the same thing for myself. Extraordinarily extroverted, love going out and talking to people. All of my work was flying around to mostly around Australia, delivering workshops face to face, and very quickly it was interesting, that phrase of essential worker, where you're suddenly like, oh, I'm not essential. Oh, I guess I'm not. Oh, like I've never thought about it that way before, but yeah, it just suddenly died down. And now most of my world is in here with the computer,
Wow.
chatting to people. But it's been quite cool in some ways, because I've got a way better work-life balance. Like before, it would be working 3 or 4 days a week, but then it would be a load of flying and staying in hotels and stuff, which is not good.
Because Australia is a big place, obviously.
Yeah, it would be.
So were you mostly up and down the like the East Coast, and then
mostly. If you go out to Perth, they've got to have stacked up like 4 days all together, because otherwise it's not worthwhile. Whereas they sometimes fly you to Melbourne for a day because it doesn't cost that much. It's great for the environment, I suspect.
So you've already made some enemies on this chat now.
Yes, churning through the Earth's resources just to build my personal wealth. It's gonna piss off a few people. Yeah. So the invite I put out, I think I'd set it as, do you hold any strong views, particularly some on which we might disagree, that you'd like to talk about? And I think you said, I've got some, I'm not sure you disagree though.
Yes, which was men and women are different.
Okay, I'm going to switch my screen.
Sports, I think the men and female personality differences, which for me build on the or run alongside the physical differences. I think it's something which I'd be interested to know how much we agree or disagree on that. But I have noticed that on some of my posts, especially about transgender sports, I think we're completely on the same page with that one. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm curious, to hear a bit about it with you. Like, and some of it is, where I might steer it is towards where we might disagree, because I think that just makes for more of an interesting conversation. But my absolute goal here, and I'm going to not just invite, ask for your feedback on this, is if it starts feeling like I'm getting combative, or you hear me using words like "but," call me out on it straight away.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to present my point of view. Say again?
Like a trigger warning. I'm getting triggered.
Yeah, you're upsetting me with your differing opinion. More because I'm just really interested in how can I effectively have conversations where I think you would deal with it quite well. If I just suddenly said, well, I think that's a pile of shit, I think you would probably actually enjoy that. Whereas some of what I'm interested in is like, is there a way that I can use all these different ways of talking to actually make it a really enjoyable conversation where I can just find out how somebody else thinks? And I think that what can happen is, if it goes at loggerheads, you get this trying to convince the other person, where I won't present what is most deep and cherished for me. I might run the risk of chucking facts at you that I think might persuade you or knock down some of the things that you believe.
So you're saying you won't be trying to present facts, or you will be?
I'm going to try and avoid that. I will if you ask me to, but I'm going to try to avoid saying, but what about this study or something like that?
Okay, sure.
We can certainly, if that's getting boring for you, you can tell me, and then we can get stuck into a debate. So which of these would you say, so you've talked a bit about the personality difference between men and women, transgender people in sports, and that men and women are different. Which of these is most important to you in that it might be deeply held, or it might alter the way you behave in your day-to-day life, or might be some way morally relevant to you?
I mean, I think they're all very similar. Let's just go maybe personality differences between men and women, I think.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So what are the personality differences between men and women? What is the truth claim behind that? What is the main thing that you would say that you believe about that?
So we haven't mentioned my background in evolutionary psychology.
Oh, tell us about that.
Okay, so that was that's what I did my when I went back to uni, which was back in 2010. I went back and I got very interested in psychology. So I did about half a year of like a pre-master's just in general psychology, and then I was moving towards doing a master's in psychology, and then the one that really appealed to me was evolutionary psychology. So I went to do another year of that, and I think a lot of my beliefs about men and women were sort of shattered during that time. So I did have
shattered during that time.
Yeah, broadly speaking, I had sort of quite left-leaning, probably in the blank slate realm of environment shapes. Environment is the primary factor, or the absolute factor that determines differences between men and women. And I hadn't really considered the idea of biology being a key factor, if not the dominant factor and then that shapes those differences. And then you've got to look into you go quite deep into statistics then, and then so you have to bring in a sort of statistical approach whereby, for example, if you say a statement like men are taller than women, someone will say, well, I've got a mate who's like 5 foot and a female who's 6 foot, and that's not a true statement. And you're like, okay, on statistical averages, the average man is 15% taller than the average woman. And
right.
in the extremes, so like if you were to the sport, for example, that would be most affected by this particular factor. If you just said, right, men and women are the same, let's just put them all together to compete, you would probably not find a single woman in the basketball team, for example, that could compete in a mixed team, because on averages, it's just, you might need you might need 500 men, you might have one woman who is the right height and on that, in that last part of the bell curve,
Sure. So what was that? I'm curious then to know, before we get into what you think or feel about it now, what was that like? You said your views were shattered. Your views on, I think you said my views on gender were shattered.
Would be like to look at it from the start to like afterwards, but it was more like slow sort of shaping of my understanding of it, really. To be like shattered would be like if I compared how I was before and after. But yeah, it's just slowly coming to terms with the idea that I guess it would. I think there are two ways you can look at things when you bring in the evolutionary perspective, because you have what they call ultimate explanations and proximate explanations for things. So approximate explanation.
That's fascinating. Yeah, what are ultimate and proximate explanations?
Okay, so let's just take one of the things I did on my my dissertation was evolution of creativity.
Okay.
So a proximate explanation for this is a guy called Tim Bergen, if you want to write it down, Tim Bergen. But anyway,
sure.
Tin Bergen. And he says, well, basically you can split ultimate and proximate into two subcategories as well. But anyway, the most important thing is a proximate mechanism. For example, why do birds sing?
Yeah.
Tin Bergen, all one word.
Oh, right. Tin Bergen.
Yeah. So why do birds sing? Well, on a proximate level, there are two things that sort of happen. One is that certain hormones and chemicals fire in their brain that say sing. Okay, so that's very sort of right down in that moment with the chemicals and the hormones in the body of the bird. But then you also have another sort of proximate mechanism, which is that when the bird reaches a certain age of maturity, certain parts of the brain have developed, which mean it's ready for that song.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the more evolutionary explanations, which are things, which is, for example, that for a lot of bird species who sing, I know it's not all of them, but a lot of bird species who sing, the females of the species are judging the quality and the repertoire of birdsong in the male, and the male is performing in order to attract females. So the ultimate mechanism is that the males who produced the better songs with the better repertoires were able to out compete in the dating market the males who were not. And this, funnily enough, these parallels go side by side with humans, where for a woman listening to various men, the repertoire of words, the vocabulary, the breadth of vocabulary is also one of the things that women find attractive,
Yeah, absolutely. I was listening to that and also going, well, you're quite well spoken. And I think that would be true. I think women would listen to you and be like, he knows a lot of things and a lot of words. I see. So so you're seeing, if I were to summarize it, this parity, or not parity isn't absolutely the wrong word, this similarity or this mirroring effect between other species, and going, right, we've got somewhere where there are birds and it's just the male singing to interest the woman. And then you can see some similarity there when it comes to how do men behave for that same ultimate explanation of how can I find a mate?
Yes, it's but then you have to create testable hypotheses.
Mm-hmm.
That so you may take some inspiration from the natural world, but then you have to fit it into the scientific method in order to test, does this work? Do indicators of creativity actually result in increased attraction in women? Which the evidence, Geoffrey Miller he's an awesome evolutionary psychologist who deals a lot with, he wrote a book called The Mating Mind, which deals a lot with this particular aspect. Yeah,
Right. And so what did you feel then when you came from that blank slate side where environment is the absolute factor, or the main or absolute factor that determines the differences between men and women? What did you feel, or do you now feel, is the strongest case for that? Because it sounds like you've moved away from that. What do you feel was or is the strongest case for that, for the other side?
I think there is no case for the blank slate. I think there is a case for environment and evolution, or environment and biology play a role, and they have an interplay. So, but the people that we're up against, which is a lot of the people in social sciences, it's called it's three S's, SSSM, which is the standard social sciences model, which is very dependent on the blank slate.
Right. Okay. And what if you were to summarize their position, do you feel that it is?
It's that, yeah, you just basically, I think it's an idea from Locke. So this is what Steven Pinker deals with in his book, The Blank Slate.
Right.
It's a combination of factors between like Rousseau, Descartes, and Locke, and they sort of I think it's the Ghost in the Machine, and I guess it's the duality aspect of Descartes, and from Locke it's the tabula rasa, which is the Latin for blank slate.
Mm-hmm. And
in the blank slate, it's just the idea that the noble savage, I think that was Rousseau. Right. So so it's the idea that we're born kind of pure, everything comes onto us from the environment, and as a result, yes, like masculinity and femininity, for example, are social constructs. Mm-hmm. As are so therefore male and female are social constructs, which is something that I'm very adamantly against now.
Adamantly against in what way?
So I think, I guess this will lead us to the controversial Canadian professor, Jordan Peterson, who
Sure.
he made this point in his debate with Cathy Newman, and he's made it repeatedly. So if the blank slate were true, then the countries that had done the most to eradicate, let's say, gender differences would show the most similarity between men and women. So Scandinavian countries, if the theory is correct, and it's society that draws boys towards mechanical objects and girls towards dolls, or a society that draws men towards the STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, maths. Sorry, maths.
Yeah.
The STEM fields are quite male-dominated, whereas fields which have more of a human element to them, whether that's something like medicine or nursing or sciences. There are a lot of sciences that are female dominated, like psychology as well. Okay. So the so those sort of differences would, if you leveled out a playing field and you said, right, it's all equal opportunity for men and women. Mm-hmm. If the theory was right, then actually you would see men and women becoming closer in those Scandinavian countries. Actually, right. You see the opposite. You see men moving more and more into the. So yeah, this leads us to. Have you heard of Simon Baron-Cohen, cousin of
yes.
Borat?
Yes.
So yeah. So yeah, he wrote. He did a lot of work on this. The Essential Differences, his book, but he.
Yes, he called it like the systematizing mind and the
empathizing.
That's it, right?
Yeah, and so yeah, the systemizing quotient and the empathizing quotient. So this difference is something which as you level out the playing field, then men will go more towards what they're naturally inclined to do. And this, I think, ability may play a role, which is the controversial one, but it's actually preference. That a guy called Lee Jassim wrote a very interesting piece about this. Preference is actually what's leading this. So it's actually, just to say men are better and women or whatever, it's not actually about better. It's about preferences. It's about, what does the average man prefer? Well, average men do have a systemizing mind. Average women, the average woman does have a systemizing, empathizing mind. And if you just let things happen naturally, then you will actually exacerbate those differences. And
right. And you said that drives preference rather than you're not saying it's saying that girls are bad at maths, but that it's driven by preference. Can you explain what you mean by that?
So yeah, this is what going to the ideas of Lee Jassim, where it's and I think he's derived it from the studies where it's if you look at women who have a high systemizing or mathematical ability, they also have a high linguistic ability.
Right.
So if you have a high level of both, you wouldn't necessarily want to be sort of locked in a room like coding all day long, like 7 days a week, because you can actually you've got law, you've got psychology, you've got medicine, you've got a whole array of options in front of you which are more socially oriented. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you're a man with a high systemizing ability, you also probably statistically will have a lower empathizing ability. So therefore, the perfect job for you, where you can make a lot of money and enjoy your work, is something like coding, engineering, something where you're just sort of there with your stuff and you're just doing it,
Yep, this is somewhat personal for me because that very much describes my father. Yeah, he's very, very, very much systematizing. Was one of the world's first computer programmers.
Okay.
So then if there are these differences in preferences, what does that then mean for you?
So how that sort of manifests itself is, yeah, there is a massive, this is going to get me some hate from some people. But yeah, there is a big push to sort of, for example, the push for equity. So this is the word which has come to sort of represent equality of outcome as opposed to equality of opportunity. So in the equality opportunity world, the girl who has a high preference for maths, for example, and who doesn't care about the social thing, yes, she may be perfect to do the thing that she wants to do, which is coding or something like this. But you still have the freedom of doing that, and you don't have any artificial quotas to create those balances of numbers. So there's sort of push to get 50-50 in STEM fields, which I disagree with, and I think it's just make it as free as possible for people to choose. But
so what does free as possible look like there?
It looks like it's without quotas, for example. So the quotas are what's removing the as free as possible. It's you don't need those artificial quotas, because actually, so as free as possible, what does it mean? Yeah, it's like, just let people be who they are, and if they have a preference and an ability at something, let them do it, regardless of whether they're male or female. But we don't need to sort of address the issue head on and start creating artificial systems to create equality of outcome, which is not actually that beneficial, because then when this brings you into affirmative action, which actually it not only does it create more, I think it creates a level of condescension for people, like he's only in it or she's only in it because she's a woman, he's only in it because he's brown or whatever,
right,
rather than actually based on their ability. And then the people who've got a lower bar, a lower threshold, because that's what creates the resentment, and then those people will also be struggling as well in that field, because it's like they're not quite, if they needed 80% and the other person needed 90% to get in, then the person with 90% will have more likability in that thing anyway.
Sure. So if we want to get to that as free as possible, because it sounds like what you're aiming for is equality of opportunity rather than that 50-50 equality of outcome. Exactly, so to then remove quotas, because we don't need to address the issue head on. Could there be benefits in addressing the issue even if we weren't aiming for equality of outcome?
So the main angle for the benefits is a lack of role models. So this is one of the, if I had to say that was the strongest argument, it would be. But then a part of me also says, well, if someone's determined to do something, then whether or not there are role models in that field, it's not gonna, I don't know if it's gonna stop them. So I've never seen any studies, so it would be interesting to see what the influence of role models is on people pursuing careers. I've never looked into that, but I would say that's the strongest argument against my position. Yeah.
Sure. So I guess I would ask it a different question then. If, and I don't say I have this, but if I said I've got this statistic that shows even though you're right and women seem largely disinterested in this STEM stuff and they're not that interested in getting locked in a basement, drinking Mountain Dew and coding for hours and hours on end. Obviously, I'm adding bits to that. But I said this actually showed that profits went up because we coded programs that were, let's say, more intuitive for the users. So if I were able to point at unintended positive consequences for that, would that change at all your position that we should remove quotas and not need to address the issue head on?
I don't think it would change my position, because it's because I still feel it's a form of discrimination against I would still say it's a form of discrimination. Yeah.
Okay, so
So
it's
you need to have, so if you're going to have positive discrimination, then you're going to have another form of discrimination, which is the people who lose out to that discrimination.
okay. I've made a very messy slide, so I want to start again here. It's because the issue then seems to be about discrimination. You do have something in common with the lefties, don't you? You don't like discrimination.
Yeah.
So if we were to then introduce those quotas, even if we could show that there would be some sort of benefit from doing so, that would be discrimination. I think if I'm to get what you're saying, let's say we're saying you've got to be in the top 10th percentile of your programming cohort to be accepted here. But if you're a woman, we'll take you in the top 15 or something. And it sounds like what you're saying is then that's unfair to 5% of men who had to work harder to get there.
Then in order to get to that 15, then you're going to have to start encroaching on that top 10%, for example, of men.
Mm-hmm.
You have to start cutting that down to 8%, or you have to. It's in that aspect, it is zero sum.
Sure. So what do we mean when we say discrimination? What do you mean when you say discrimination?
It's taking someone based on certain characteristics or traits that they have and putting them out of favor, I would say.
Right. So based on certain traits that they have and putting them out of favor.
Can't change. Yeah.
Something that they can't change.
Mm.
Right. So what about IQ then? If I were to say I'm not able to change my IQ, would it be the same as saying somebody's discriminating against me if they just said, Harry, you're too dumb to do this job? People have said that to me before.
Yeah, okay, that's a very good example. So yeah, I would say right, so you can't change your IQ. What can you? I would say that in a meritocracy, then you need so you need some forms of discrimination in order to run a meritocracy, but they shouldn't be. They can be ability-based criteria, but they shouldn't be non-ability-based criteria. So they shouldn't be skin color, gender, or anything else like that.
Mm-hmm. So if I were then going, I do want to discriminate, and I do want to discriminate in favor of women, but I'm picking ability-based criteria. Perhaps I was going to say, given that they're female, their verbal reasoning skills, is that a term you used before? Verbal reasoning or sort of language?
Yeah, linguistic, I said.
Linguistic, sorry. Skills were higher. I'm going to then bring them in. Would that be an acceptable form of discrimination?
So this brings you to did you ever follow the James Damore scenario?
Yes. The Google manifesto.
Manifesto, memo. I think it's manifesto. I think they called it the enemies of him. They called it the anti-diversity screed.
Yes, I saw it. Remember when it was called that? Yes. So he called it. That's right. Google's ideological echo chamber. Yep. Carry on.
Yeah. So in his memo, let's call it. let's be kind. In his memo, he just said, right, in my field, you probably will still get, because of these biological differences, you probably will still get a male-dominated field in the areas of in the actual coding itself, but because of the higher social abilities of women, why don't we try and bring in women as managers and as sort of helping to shape the actual process? He got hated for this, but actually I think it's quite a good point. There are some areas within computing, for example, that would benefit if you have women who really are on the level of the top men, then bring them in by all means. But if you there are some other areas where women could find roles which would improve, like you said, the productivity of those groups, and code, I would say, managerial managerial skills would be that thing. So if you were bringing, so I wouldn't want to mess with the meritocracy in the actual coding ability area. But yeah, there are ways you could sort of move towards more gender balance without actually influencing the merit, or in fact in a positive way for the company, if you like.
So yeah, so then how, I guess, if we were going when we it's acceptable to discriminate based on ability, I guess the question would become, what abilities should we look at if we're aiming for this equality of opportunity? Well, is that what we're aiming for? Is that what you're aiming for, I guess? Is it equality of opportunity, or what would you say is the goal when it comes to this?
Yeah, I would say equality of opportunity is, so back in the civil rights movement, that's what was being asked for, from all those different elements of it, just equality of opportunity. So to be able to, or get married, or to be able to get a job without, or same work, same pay, that kind of situation. And I think that's a very noble aim. Whereas, yes, I think when you, now it's shifted a lot, and it's become more about quotas, and I think we're back to where we were. But I would sort of, the one thing I didn't mention was that these ideas, which is something that Simon Baron-Cohen also mentions in his book, they go back to our sort of hunter-gatherer. So we spent 99% of human existence as hunter-gatherers. So so the modern world is not something we're like particularly adapted for. So the in the hunter-gatherer world, it was men who were kind of going further away from the center of the, let's call it a village. They were moving like further away and crossing more territories. They were facing the challenge of taking down larger prey and bringing home meat and things like this, which was beneficial for them. And the women were more in a close-knit community, looking after the babies, and they had more need for social skills, the ability to look at a baby and mind read what the baby is going through. So these differences, for me, they're very much grounded in the evolutionary past, where we used to live, where the selective, this is what the key of evolutionary theory is selective pressures lead to changes. And the selective pressures for men were to have a lower empathizing ability. If they did see a stray man from another tribe, they'd be better off killing him than letting him go, in that sense, if he looked threatening or whatever. So men then evolve, if they see a deer, and they look at it and they're like, oh wow, what a beautiful deer. No, that's not great. They need to be like, yeah, bam, and then they bring home the deer. Sure. And they whereas for women, there were benefits for this high empathizing ability, because not just from looking after their children, but also from networking within the other females of the group and forming social bonds in order to, if there's a famine stage, who's going to chuck them a bit of extra food or whatever, so for men and women, social hierarchies are evolved in our evolutionary past, were always very important. I've just sort of diverged a little bit, but yeah.
No, I think it's very, very interesting, because then I'm guessing what you're saying is, because we've spent 95% of our time in that space where selective pressure is driven down, there is reason to believe that selective pressure could have driven down male empathizing ability, or conversely driven it up in women. Then what you're saying, I think, is those differences are likely to persist until today.
Yes. So one of the old sayings in evolutionary psychology is that we we have, I think it's Tubi and Cosmides, who are the kind of like the founders of the field. We have Stone Age minds housed in modern skulls. So we still have all that hard wiring from nature. And yes, I would say the frontal cortex is the part of our brain where which sort of controls a lot of our more animalistic behaviors. And yeah, we kind of have to obviously find a balance between things, between being more sort of animalistic and being more sort of in the modern world. But yes, we do have some things, and trying to it's a bit like forcing someone to use their less dominant hand, for example. So you can try and fix these things, but it's never going to be quite right. I think that's a good analogy for.
Yeah, I really like that analogy. So it's like asking someone to use their non-dominant hand. I like that. So, and it's it's never, when you say it's never going to be, say again, sorry?
For a right-handed person.
Yes, yeah. I was going to say non-dominant. I was like, I'm adding my own words in. Naughty. It's not, when you say it's not right, or do you say it's not quite right? Not right.
I just think it's not, I don't think it's taking into account our, no, sorry. It's like asking a right-handed person to use their left hand.
Right, sure.
So yeah, it's kind of like, we could segue into the trans conversation here, because this is I got that idea from Deborah So's book called The End of Gender. I don't know if you followed Deborah So, but she does a lot of work on. So I think her use of that analogy was for a boy who becomes a girl, or a girl who becomes a boy, because at a very young age. So that was, but I think it also works for someone who's not, someone who gets 80% when you need 90% to get into an engineering course, and just saying, well, here you go, because of your traits, we're going to give you the place. Then, that thing, the analogy also fits for that as well.
Yeah, I like metaphors in general. I like this metaphor because what I'm assuming from the metaphor, at least in the way I've been using my hands, is that on the one hand, it is the masculine, which I guess that sort of archetype might be, as you said, lower levels of empathy, possibly, I think you would say, higher levels of aggression or risk-taking behavior or something like that.
Yeah, as well.
And then on the feminine side would be more empathizing. And then when I then take it back to the metaphor, I wonder, is that not right? That we're asking people who are good at risk-taking and good at reducing empathy or not feeling it, or sort of that masculine, to say, hey, be a bit more empathetic. Or conversely, to say to women who might just naturally rate higher in terms of preference or whatever at empathizing, to say, hey, if you see something's not right, speak up, or lean into that more risk-taking space. And I wonder, is that not right?
Oh, I see. I think that's a different concept from the sort of quota-based thing. So yeah, I think, right. I guess we have to, if we bring it back to Peterson again, he uses the idea of how he coaches women to be more assertive, as part of his work. And sure, you can, if there are things that you want, and you can borrow traits that are not, to enhance your position, then of course use them. So in that sense, you can take those, let's say, male traits and use them if you're a woman. Vice versa for a man who can try and learn to be more empathetic. But in terms of the starting point, if you're a man who's a bit aggressive and a risk taker, is being a nurse the right profession? Probably not, But so yeah.
It's interesting because I'm not meant to be, but I'm going to present my point of view, because when it goes back to James Damore, I got the impression from his memo that he was actually arguing against accelerating women into leadership positions? Because one of the bits I vaguely recall was him saying women aren't as driven by status, so that's why they don't go for these positions. And it seemed like he was arguing, just let the people, whoever's asking for that position, go for it. And I would very much agree if I got the sense from it that you gave, which was maybe women would be better in these positions, because that's something I've long thought about with it, which is women in sat in front of a computer in a dark room with endless Doritos and Mountain Dew, asked to program. Sure, if she can program amongst the best of the guys, great, but it seems like a massive waste of somebody who's got this other-handed skills. So I agree with this last bit very much, which is sort of you borrow those traits so that you can become ambidextrous. Probably not all the time. You're still going to absolutely have your dominant preference. When somebody chucks you a ball, you're going to catch it with that hand. But yeah, I would think, are there then benefits of the other side, of leaning into that empathizing?
Yeah, no, I think there are definitely benefits, and I think that, yeah, I would say that, yeah, there are obviously going to be benefits from that, but it's not necessarily a way to set up a system for it. If you know what I mean, it's like,
Okay.
Take those benefits if you can enhance your. I think one of the issues that I see a lot is the idea that, yes, the hierarchy that sort of has been created by men is one that we're expecting women to sort of follow, and this is what one of the issues I have with feminism is that it's like, yeah, you've got to play by the men's rules, or women have to play by the men's rules, and I have issue with that. I think it's like, yeah, again, it's more for a freer society without so much like shaping, and you would need, in order to get to those stages, you need government to get bigger and more powerful in order to micromanage people's lives. And I'm obviously against that.
Sure. Okay. So it sounds like what you're saying is, if we created more freedom, then I would happily accept that as an outcome. But I don't want the government to dictate that that's an outcome and micromanage our lives to make it so.
Yeah.
Right. So it sounds like then on some case, on many fronts, you would agree with a lot of what the feminists say on that then.
In which sense?
In terms of, it sounds like you're aligned, at least how I imagine feminists would describe their objective. It would be that freer society where people are free to
maybe first and second wave feminists, I would say, maybe. But
okay.
I think they've moved the goalposts somewhat, and we're heading into that quota system, I think.
Sure. Okay. So it's very much the quota system that you have a problem with there.
Yeah, and just I guess it ties into ideas about relationships as well, where
Sure, tell me about that.
Yeah, where it's I believe the word is hypergamy, which is where where women go across and up, and men go across and down in like status, if you like, in the dating market. And this is
men will marry a stripper?
That kind of thing. But yeah,
not
that's
that there's
an
anything
extreme
wrong with
version.
stripping, but
yeah, but yeah, it's the idea that status is something, social status is something which is much more appealing for women looking for men than the other way around. And as such, yeah, one but also this sort of a cross and up thing also works in short-term dating as well. So on Tinder, for example, I think I looked at the statistics, I think it's the top 80% of women will be going for the top 20% of men on Tinder, for example. So it's like it's quite an extreme natural phenomenon that happens, whether or not it's in the short term or in the long term, where I believe status will be more important than looks. So the sort of, yeah, and that's something which happens naturally, and it's unfortunate for men, because for some men, because you end up with a lot of this. You get this. You've heard about the incel phenomenon.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Tell us about it though. Other people won't have.
Okay. Yeah. So the incel phenomenon it's got a very bad reputation, but it's men who are involuntarily celibate. So they would love to have relationships, but due to the competitiveness, I believe, of the dating market, if you like, it's very difficult for them to get on it, and as such, they sort of form groups and stuff, and I can't remember exactly what the bad reputation is from. I think it's something to do with hating women or something. I don't know, but anyway, yeah, I think they want to get relationships.
I think the murdering might have had something to do with it as well. Quite a few of them have gone murdering.
Okay, are there incels murdering then?
Yeah, the two kings of it. Oh, let me tell you bits about it. Elliot Rodger and Alec Manassian. And
Okay.
Elliot Rodger got a gun and went to his school and shot a chunk of people, and he made all of these very weird videos to watch where he's like sitting in his dad's BMW, and his dad's like a film producer or something. So he's extraordinarily wealthy and quite a good looking chap. And he's saying like, these girls just won't look at me, and is getting really angry about that. So he got a gun and went and shot a bunch of people. And then Alec Manassian was he started this to do an ER is what they would call it, where they would talk about in their forums about doing a mass shooting. And then Alec Manassian followed in his style, where he tried to, I think the story is he tried to buy a gun, failed, then rented a van and drove it down the street, killing a chunk of people. And then there is a fairly interesting, sort of chilling and sad police interview with him, where he sort of very eloquently, in this slightly peculiar voice, describes that he's trying to start an incel rebellion. And amongst many incels, there's also this thing of like, they are deified amongst them. They make songs about doing an Alec Manassian now.
Really? Oh,
yeah.
Okay, that's great. Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, I'm not like on an all-out defense incel there.
No, well, I'm not suggesting you are, because if I were to share my view on it, I think it might relate to some of the biological pressures you talked about before, which you're going to know much more about evolutionary psychology than I do. So I'm only going to be dipping my toe, and please correct me wherever I go wrong. But I listened to this very long lecture from a Stanford lecture about tournament species versus pair bonding species.
Yes.
And they talked about how you can tell which is which just by looking at them, because if they are sexually dimorphic, so men are taller than women, whereas in species where they're pair bond, they're closer to the same size. There's differences in everything from testosterone to amount you ejaculate to intra-species violence. And the suggestion is amongst tournament species, you have these giant like apes and bulls at the farm that we have, huge amount of weight, there's a huge cost for that. But I think the explanation is, in an evolutionary sense, they're going to need to battle other males for it. That's the only reason they use it once every blue moon, to batter another male out of his territory. And so some of what I wonder about the incels is whether that's the socializing thing of thinking that's what they're meant to do, or a biological sense of, I'm not getting any, I can see other people around me it's time to do something hyper violent. But I wonder if that's some of what drives it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the hyper violence is probably at the extremes of it. I think somewhere in the middle, it's just like, I guess it's like not feeling worthy, or not feeling able to participate in society in a normal way, I guess. But yes, the going to the tournament species and the pair bonded species, yes. So I think the examples would be like gibbons are quite similar in size, penguins. These could be examples of pair bonded species.
Okay, right. Oh, they're a cute monkey, aren't they? And penguins,
whereas
okay.
the most extreme version of a most extreme version of a sexually dimorphic species, which, for people who are not sure what that means, it's the big difference between, in this case, the male and the female would be, the male would be bigger and the female smaller, is the elephant seal. And I actually went to, if you wanted to use modern parlance, you could say so I think that one, there's one there with a male and a female together.
Is that okay? I can probably get male. Oh, right, this one.
Yep, for example, yeah.
Right, and he's also got this big giant snout.
Yeah, that's for battling with, yeah.
Right, okay.
So yeah, so the elephant seal is the males are about 4 times the size, and they have these harems of up to 40 females in them. And the sort of lean ones can hold the harem for a bit of time because they're quite lean and agile, but eventually it's just the really like bulky ones that end up dominating. And then the ones that just don't compete, I actually, funnily enough, I was driving, this is like a bit of a story, but yeah, I was driving down Highway 1 in California with my dad, and we saw like a few people stopping with their cars parked, and we were like, okay, let's check it out. So we just pulled over, and it was just a whole beach of these, they call it a bachelor beach. And it's the ones the elephant seals who couldn't compete anymore, and it's just all males just sort of living out their days like on their own, like pointless.
Incels, right? Incel, yeah, elephant whale.
They would be like incels. And
elephant seal, sorry.
So yes, yeah, I would say, relationships are so yeah, men may dominate in some areas of finance or in some monetary senses. There may be a 70p or 70 cents to $1 pay gap, but in some areas, like, women do hold the cards, and the biggest area is short-term dating. Mm-hmm. In long-term dating, men and women are more similar in that they're interested in loyalty and honesty and aspects like that. But in short-term dating, it's the biggest difference between men and women in that area, where women really do, in short-term relationships, they will go for a man with better genes, and in short-term relationships for men, it's how do you put it politely, ease of access, let's say.
Sure. Okay. So then I guess that, because I think what feminists or people on the progressive left might say to that is, if that's true, and we are somewhere between these two, but perhaps somewhat of a tournament species, that will create a hierarchy which will tend towards becoming quite unjust. That you would have sort of alphas who are willing to take the most risks and sort of put their life on the line, who will make more money and crush and keep other people out of any space. So that could be a sort of business space, or from letting trans people choose their pronouns or something like that. And so what I think the argument from that side might be is, are there things we could put in place to go sort of back closer to a pair bonding species, where men, particularly because one of the things I understand about pair bonding is males share the parenting duties. Is that right? They're more likely to look after the kids, whereas the tournament, they sort of give you the kids and go away.
Yeah. So yeah, let me just bring in one other aspect to this tournament species, which we didn't quite touch on, which is, so one element of tournament species is what's called intrasexual selection, which is like the elephant seal example, or lions, where you could put in brackets for tournament species there, you could put in brackets intrasectional. Sorry, what would I call that one?
Intrasexual, did you say?
Sexual competition, yeah.
Right, I see. So the males fight the males for the females.
Yeah. I guess this other one is, I've forgotten. I'm not sure if this one is. So, but like, let's just go for it anyway. But yeah, the peacock is another example of a very sexually dimorphic species. But the males are no longer competing with other males. Well, they are competing with other males, but it's actually female choice that determines the successful ones. And it's not a dominance aspect. It's actually a beauty competition, if you like. Sure. So it's a the word is lecking, which is like I think it's from Swedish, which L-E-K, yeah, or just like type it in there, yeah. So I think it's from L-E-K-K.
Lek mating, I see, lecking. No, aggregation of male animals gathered to engage in competitive displays and courtship rituals known as lecking to entice visiting females, which is surveying. I love it. What? So a girl turns up. I can see it here now. A girl turns up. They're like, "Quick, get your tail feathers out, boys!"
Yeah, yeah. It's basically that.
Right. So okay.
So you can't. I think your idea about the competition is missing one of the key elements of humans, which is that female choice plays a key role. In fact, female choice is also, it's not just the man who gets all the power, because the man gets all the power unless he just kills all the other men. There's always going to be other aspects of competition, and a good leader is one that is popular and doesn't like. This brings us into another debate, but yeah, a good leader will lead by prestige as opposed to social dominance. Lecking is where, for example, in the peacock sense, yeah, the female will survey the males on display, and they will actually like line up and queue for the one who shows the best display, the brightest colors, and so yeah, again, in the freer society, yes, we have the number of triggers that a woman has. I think for attraction for women, they'll add up a bunch of these criteria, such as height, physique, symmetry of the face, social status, social dominance, creativity, sense of humor. There are like an array of factors, and I think there's a threshold that needs to be met in order for attraction to occur for a woman. And this is a conflict between finding a mate with the best genes and a mate with the best status in terms of who's going to provide for me when I'm pregnant and get me in hunter-gatherer world. That would be a very tricky scenario. But you also, good genes are also key, because you want your offspring to also, you want to be a grandparent as well. So you can't just, you got to sort of find that balance between having attractive offspring and intelligent, healthy offspring, and having someone who's going to be loyal and stay with you while you're pregnant, for example, and during infancy. So then, so
it seems like it's then linked for you. It seems like it's linked for you then, this idea of there being a sort of social sphere of what people are talking about when they say equality or equity, and then, and that's sort of often they would be talking about business or how many CEOs are women or something like that. And it seems you link that quite intrinsically to then female sexual preferences or dating preferences, partnering, whatever you want to call it.
I'm not sure about that link. I think
Okay.
what I'm saying is here is it's not just wealth that determines success. It's also your success in the dating market. And
Right.
whilst men have I would say have a bit of an edge, especially at the top of the bell curve,
Mm-hmm.
less so. For example, I think less so outside of the top. Like that seven CEOs of are women out of the top, let's see, 100 companies. Whereas, yeah, I think in some areas men have it a lot more difficult than women, which is it's much more competitive anyway to be a man.
Yeah, in which realms of life do you feel men have it more difficult? In which ways do you think men have it more difficult?
This is the key one. What we've been discussing is dating.
Okay.
So yes, you could be a male who can have a new girl every week, for example, whereas some will struggle even in their lifetime. So it's kind of the range is bigger.
Okay, and is it? I feel like I'm putting words in your mouth now, and I don't mean to. But is what you're saying? It balances out a bit.
It kind of balances out, and I think it's just something that the feminist movement doesn't seem to consider when making their positions, especially about inequality. And I think it's something that is much trickier landscape to navigate for men, and it doesn't seem to get any airtime, and like you said, like obviously there are those horrible representatives of incels, but actually the actual concept of being an incel gets a very, they're just like treated like losers or whatever, but actually it is something which society needs to look at as well and consider.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. Despite having mentioned this stuff about incels, I think I would agree with you on that. They're sort of laughed at and derided, where it's like, I thought the whole idea of progressing or sort of becoming ambidextrous or being more empathetic is if you're struggling, you say that. If you go, girls don't fancy me and it makes me feel awful about myself, fantastic. Yeah. So if they were then to say, I've got this method that could balance that as well. I don't know what I'm not able to conceive of what that method was, but if they said, here is this thing this thing that I could ask us all to implement that would balance that as well. So it would introduce more women in terms of positions of leadership, or more female programmers or into STEM fields or whatever. And through that, it also affected this female dating selection. Would that be
I don't know how you can, I don't know how you can influence that female dating selection. I think more successful women want men who are more successful than they are. So in a bizarre way, it's like, yes, in a bizarre way, the more success that women have, the trickier it becomes. It becomes even trickier than that. That's not trying to say that we should try and stop women from being successful, but it's a strange part of the
more successful they get, the further they are from my reach. Yeah, it's
and this is I've seen articles about this even in the Guardian, where it's like, very successful women feel like there are no options out there, for them.
Interesting. Okay. Is there anything, I think this has been a really good chat. Is there anything else about this? Like if you were to offer or encourage people to take something away in terms of perhaps a change to their perception, or a thing to consider, or perhaps mostly something that would change how they behaved when relating to all of this stuff, is there something particularly that you would highlight as something important?
So I think this for me will have an impact on how we bring up boys and girls,
Mm-hmm.
And in that area, there seems to be a strong movement to just go completely gender neutral, or even the reverse, and try and encourage boys to play with what are traditionally girls' toys, and vice versa. So I would just say, if your son loves cars, just encourage that and leave him to sort of play with his cars and his other mechanical toys. And if your girl loves dolls and princesses, just resist this movement to sort of completely remove or this idea that gender is a social construct, because it clearly isn't. There's clearly a very strong biological basis for gender.
So what would be, I guess what would be the value then in that, because it sounds like what you're saying is because this is so strong and biological and not as nearly as much, or not at all, I think you were saying before, socialized.
No. I think social and environmental have a strong, social and evolutionary have a strong interplay.
Okay.
Still leaning obviously towards evolutionary, but sometimes the social is stemmed from the evolutionary as well. So some of our social norms about girls and boys may have come about due to those evolved. Here's another example that shows you how our environmental or social lives are impacted by the environment. It's using spice in food. So in countries which are very hot, they use a lot of spice. In countries which they're famous, obviously, there's the English comedian comedian group, Goodness Gracious Me, and they say, I want the most bland food possible. They eat
yes.
restaurant. Obviously, blandness is a sort of something that people sort of attribute to European foods. But anyway,
white person thing,
But anyway, the essence here is that actually, in countries with the colder climates, you didn't need to put as much spice in your food because the food could preserve much easier. Whereas in Mexico and in India and in Thailand, you just have to whack in all this spices in order to, which is a sort of antibacterial, which
is that what it is? I always thought it was covering the meat that was going off a bit or something. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. Right. So it's sort of, it's not so much covering the flavor of the meat going off, but it'll kill some of the bugs on the meat.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And what that then becomes biological, does it?
Well, no, that stemmed from the biological, biological aspect of what happens to meat, if you like. And so that's something that's, meat goes off, but meat will go off, like I say, scientific, if you like, rather than biological. But it's like, meat will go off quicker in these countries than these countries. So just whack some herbs on it, and then that will reduce your impact. So that's like a form of evolution through culture. This is a very strong interplay between the two. And so where are we going? So I do think the people I'm against are people who say there's a lot of these enemies of reason, if you like. So there's no biological impact, and I can deal with people who say biology is less important than environment. I'm happy to have that debate, but to say there's none, which is what a lot of people who say gender is a social construct, for example, this is what they're putting forward.
Fair enough. Excellent. Do you have any questions or challenges for me?
So just I would like to know if there was anything that you thought was way off, or
anything that I thought was way off. No, I think I agree with a lot of it. I think what I would say is the two bits on which we might disagree are, I think of the people who say gender is a social construct, I feel like, and perhaps you would agree with this, but when I was hearing you say it, it sounded like they were actually a narrow category, where I feel they're quite a broad category. Interestingly, slightly provocatively, I think amongst males on the left. I hear much more acknowledgement. Notice I'm right, and they acknowledge that. That's not what I meant. Or like sort of much more of a sort of openness to the position of biological differences. I just think that for many of a large chunk of them, they go, sure, they're there, but they're overstated, and it's not the differences aren't so great that you end up with so few women in positions of power. And I think the number who go, biology doesn't make any difference, do exist. I was chatting with one just the other week, but I think they are a narrow, quite young, quite poorly informed minority. It's what I feel is happening with that group, and I'm looking to speak to more people so I can understand it better, is of the larger majority who speak like and say gender is a social construct, and then will trot out facts that seem to support this idea of, nurture versus nature, so to speak. They sound to me a little bit like Christians who deny evolution. And when you talk to them about it, you're like, you do understand this, because the large chunk don't, but you're like, you do understand this. And then when you dig into it, they go, well, if we tell children that they're animals, they'll behave like animals. And you go, this is actually a moral position rather than a factual position, where I think that what they're holding is, if we say, yeah, men do take more risks, and we know that that will have a ratcheting effect on income. We do know that men will voluntarily work longer hours in isolation, so that will have a ratcheting effect on income. They will travel. They'll give up liberties. They will go into jobs they don't like. And some of those might be driven by biology. If we accept that, then we're saying, well, that's it. Don't bother trying to have women in positions of power.
That's not the case,
Yeah, and I don't think that is the case. And I'm not suggesting you do. I think that they're just worried that if we accept this fact, if it is a fact, then what will cascade is a bunch of decisions and behaviours that they don't agree with. And so I think that's some of their position, but I don't mean to speak for other people on that. One I do think is we might somewhat disagree on is I also work often with women on making them more assertive. And when I work with men, particularly in more leadership positions, I'm often encouraging them to do exactly what I really like this idea of like asking a right-handed person to use their left hand. In fact, I think I might steal that metaphor and use it, which is like, the better you get at it. Well, I've got this thing here. I've just started bouldering. My girlfriend's got me into bouldering, and my weak hand, partly because I crashed on it twice, on my motorbike, is much weaker, where I go, if I want to climb a wall, if I want to top more bouldering problems, I want to get stronger with my less dominant hand, because this one's great. I can latch onto a hold and hang off it just fine. Whereas this one, it's like count the seconds till you drop. You better get a foot on the wall. So some of what my encouragement is to go, essentially I would encourage positive discrimination in the workplace, but I would agree, no point in the government doing that. I think you would probably just do a bit of research, and what I think would be the ideal is female women who understand programming enough to manage teams of really diehard programmers, because then they'll be able to talk to the rest of the organization and go, what is it you want this widget to actually do? Because I got a bunch of guys in there who hyperventilate if I tell them they've got to come into this meeting, and if you disagree with them, they'll start shouting at you. Right. But I'll understand your needs. I'll take it back to them. We'll build a product that is fit for use. That's good. Where I would say that would be 100% discrimination, but I would be going, it's discrimination with a design to drive up profits. Because then I think
one response to this, just the segment before.
Sure.
Just a quick one is when you. This is from I don't know if have you followed Gad Saad, any of his work? Or his book,
I've heard of Gad Saad. I don't think I've followed any of his work.
Podcast as well. But yes, he's very interesting, and his book is amazing. But one of the things that you have to do in like evolutionary psychology, for example, is to build I think you gave it some really like nerdy term, nomological networks of knowledge or something strange like that. Anyway, the idea is like, for example, if gender is a social construct, then, here's one specific thing. Men like women with a ratio of zero point 0.7 from their hips to their waist. Have you heard of that one?
Yes, I've heard of this. Yeah.
So yeah,
I think you got involved in a staunch debate with my next chatting partner over this ratio on my Facebook wall at some stage. Yep, carry on. Sorry.
So, so how do we know that's true? Well, if you collect data from across countries, even as you change the, let's say, thickness of the woman or thinness of the woman, the ratio stays the same across cultures.
Sure.
If you so that's one data point. If you if you take a blind man, a man who was born blind and has grown up blind, he still has that preference. If you go to
just imagining how they tested that. Now I hope you're okay with this study, John. What we're going to do is bring you into a room and you're going to feel up a selection of women and then tell us which you find the most appealing. Does that sound like something you can do for us, John? Yes. And my twin will be along soon to continue the experiment.
Yeah. I imagine mannequins, but that's
right.
Yeah. Anyway, then you could, which is also another aspect of it. Then you take you go to this is one of the things that Gads had actually told one of his students or doctoral students. Can you go to porn sites and can you when you see the adverts pop up for women advertising, give me a call, can you just write down the numbers that they quote for their measurements,
right?
And then just take a study of those, and then if you take a study of those, it goes to 0.7. So it's like there's like a huge body of evidence that it's impossible to sort of where do you even begin to sort of contradict that, because it's that is something which is clearly something that is optimal for male preference, and there are going to be biological roots for that as well, which tie into the idea of hips need to be set and narrow to a certain point in order to enable running as fast as possible, which men don't have, whereas women have to compromise in that they have to be wide enough to give birth as well. So this sort of leads to the speed difference between men and women over 100 meters, for example, is that wider hips are a compromise between speed for escaping predators or hunting prey or whatever, and wide enough to give birth, whereas men didn't need that compromise, which I think is something which, if we do have a next debate and discuss trans, it is something that leads into that debate as well. But yeah, I think it's this body of evidence which you go across these different things, including porn sites, and you still get the same result.
Sure. What bit was that? How do we get to that? Because you were saying you wanted to respond to one of the things I'd said.
Oh, that was responding to the gender as a social construct argument. If gender was not a social construct, then these attraction cues which men have evolved for women wouldn't be there.
Right, they wouldn't be so consistent cross-cultural. Yeah,
consistent cross-cultural and across ages. Men will maintain that through their years, and it's a sign of fertility, and it's the sign of that optimal compromise, if you like.
Sure. Okay. Excellent. So yeah, we'll then next time we can chat about trans issues in sports. I think it's an interesting one, but I think we would probably end up just agreeing on that. I think it's I think some of the challenges from what I was saying before, and I do need to chat to more people who are on that quite far on the left side about that stuff. I feel like I'm not sure on purpose or accidentally get boxed into silly corners because the number of people that it affects versus the amount of airtime that you give it factored in with whether it strengthens or delegitimizes a position, I think is really interesting. Because when I talk to most people on the left and they go, people in America have to work 3 jobs and they're still basically in poverty and they don't have any health care, I go, well, that's terrible. Somebody needs to sort that out. And it's like, great. Yeah, by the way, men are going to run next to women in the women's 100-meter sprint. I'm like, hang on, what? That we go from issues where I think many people could agree to then issues where you're like, why are we even talking? Like, this is so, it seems to me so on the surface bizarre to try to sort of to make an argument. And it's like, well, it's all about equality. I'm like, well, it's a difficult one. So yeah, so we can certainly chat about that one next time, but we've gone quite long. I've taken up quite enough of your time, and I think enough for anybody to watch.
I really enjoyed it. It's been a fun conversation, and yeah, I think if your goal is to have healthy, productive conversations, then I think you're achieving that for this one anyway. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, great.
Good stuff. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. Thank you. I'll wrap that up on thingy as well. There we go. Wrapping up the live stream one. Don't think anybody joined. Nope.
Okay, but that will go online as well then.
Yes, yeah, and I've already linked you in it. So if you wanna share it or do anything with it, you're welcome to. And I will also, I've also got it recorded. So if you wanted it yourself, I can happily drop it to you.
Okay, yeah, I mean, yeah, maybe just for my records, I could have if